those sort of boring and unfortunate back end steps of knitting. Not my favorite. Not my favorite.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and this is OC, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with us today. OC's having a little bit of a rough day. She just wants to be snuggled, right? She's also very much due for her spring, summer shave. And so she's just in the last couple of weeks of sort of looking like a little baby alpaca. So it's just getting a little bit warmer here. We are coming to you from a small farm in Connecticut. And like I said, my name is Nora. I have been knitting for just over a year now, and we've been doing this podcasting thing for a few months. So I have a few things to talk to you guys about today. I will say that I feel like for the first time, I feel like this week I got less done than I ever have in a week. And I will admit that I am filming maybe a couple days short of a full week. So there's less there, but also there was a lot of thinking being done over the past week. Also, I think you might be able to hear in my voice that the cold sore that appeared a few weeks ago was just a precursor to whatever I have going on now. So I feel okay, but I sound like this. So I hope that you will bear with me while we talk about some knitting today. And I have some things to talk about. And so let's just go ahead and dive on in. So if you were here with me last week, you will have seen that I had a little bit of a hesitation when trying on one of my whips. And so I think I'd like to start by going in and talking about that first. So let's chat about my sand cardigan by Maria Isaeva of Ullin Knitwear. These are the very humble beginnings of what will be a sort of duster length cardigan. And I am knitting this out of Nora Madara and the colorway Sake. So I am knitting the size 5, and I am using a smaller needle size than what the pattern recommends, but it was how I was able to get the most comfortable gauge. So I am knitting this on a 4.5 millimeter needle. And the construction of this cardigan is different from anything that I have ever knit before. And I think that in this circumstance, it's actually paying off for me. I really put in maybe 3, maybe 5 rows of work since last week. So this is the progress keeper here, and I've quite literally done about 1 inch of knitting. So I'm just going to take that out now so that we could put this on and I can talk you through some of my feelings. Okay, so with the cardigan on my body here, you can see that the sleeve is quite large. Like I said, I am knitting this in the size 5, and that actually is a smaller size than what I would have typically gone for. And I believe that with the gauge that I'm getting, my end result will even be smaller than what was intended for the gauge in the pattern. However, everything that I have heard about and researched about this yarn is that it tends to grow a lot in blocking. So my initial idea of having a slightly more dense fabric and knitting this at a slightly smaller size than I would normally was that in blocking, plus having a duster length cardigan, eventually this whole thing would relax and stretch out quite a bit. So prior to blocking, I think I pictured having something that would maybe even frighten me with how small it was looking. So I'm a little bit shocked at the depth of this armhole. So my thought last week was that I would knit a few more inches still on the body and then determine how I was feeling about it. But I've really stared at this every day since then and ultimately have decided that I'm going to block it tonight. And I'm predicting that the actual body of this is exactly the size that I want it to be. However, the depth of this armhole and the overall size of this sleeve, I think is just way too big. And really, I mean, this is maybe how big I would want it to be after blocking, but I think even that might be a bit much for the longevity of the garment and the way that I intend, or not intend, but expect it to stretch and weigh itself down over time. So I might even argue that at this point, I have done 7 or 8 sets of decreases. And even still, I think that the overall sleeve might be about 4 inches too big in circumference. Being that when I have it pinched here, I have about 2 inches of fabric on either side. So I think that the smartest move here, even though it's not the one I really want to do, is going to be to block it. And assuming that the predictions I just made are accurate, the next steps would then be to rip back the body that I have knit after the sleeves have been joined and decide how much I still need to rip back a little bit further to create a more shallow armhole. And even with that more shallow armhole, I think I might follow the stitch counts for picking up the sleeves in a size or 2 sizes down. Now, yes, when you look at photos of this cardigan, the sleeves are intended to be oversized. The whole thing is supposed to be a very relaxed fit. However, I'm just concerned, like I said, with the longevity over time, how much I do expect it to weigh down and stretch out. This is a wool, silk, yarn. It's going to stretch out. So I would prefer that things be a touch. If it's going to be on one side or the other of it fits perfectly, I'd rather it err on the side of a little too small than too big, because it can always stretch out. And I really don't want it to look sloppy. I want it to look relaxed, but not so oversized that it looks like I ran out of the house in my robe is my fear. So like I said, I think at the moment, the body is feeling right. Whereas last week I thought, oh my gosh, is this turning out too big? I'm going to have to go back to square one and start over from scratch. I'm feeling like at the moment, that's not the case, which is a good thing. It's still unfortunate that I think I am going to have to rip back a bit, but I think that I wanted to talk about it today because these are just parts of the steps. I'm not always invested in the finished product of my knits, and that might be a controversial thing to say. Sometimes I do just knit something because I want to knit it, and I might even knit something because I just want to see what the hype is about. I might knit something to have it for a photo op or for one occasion, and then I'm satisfied with that. But this was always intended to be something that I would have for the rest of my life until I wear it through. And that was why I felt comfortable investing in the yarn. It's why I feel comfortable investing the time in knitting such a long garment. And so I think it would be foolish of me to ignore the fact that it's looking a little oversized. Now, who knows? Maybe once I got this blocked, I'll feel differently. But I think that this is an important part of the process that I'm fortunate to at least have this opportunity to talk to you about it and talk through these things. And I think I wanted to maybe encourage you, if you are in a project that you're having those hesitations and second guessing, and maybe you don't talk to a camera once a week about your knits, maybe take the moment to pause and go through those sort of boring and unfortunate back end steps of knitting if the final product is that important to you. So that's where we're at on the sand cardigan. Of course, this is going to delay so many things. As it stands, this has been a whip for 23 days, and already I haven't worked on it since the day I spoke to you last. That was when I knit those few rows and ultimately said stop. So naturally, the time that this stays on the needles is going to be that much longer, which I guess is even a better reason that I have decided not to put a deadline on this, but really knit on this project, work on this project until it's just right and exactly what I wanted. So that's what I'm going to do. And I was going to block it last night, but I figured it would probably be best for us to just sort of document this stage of the process and talk through it with you. And hopefully by next week, it will be dry and off the blocking mats. And I will have either already addressed these concerns or will at least have it to try on once more before I go ahead and do that. So this is where we're at, 23 days on the needles, and she'll be hitting the blocking mats tonight, and we'll just see how things go. So that's where we're at with the sand cardigan. I just realized too that I actually forgot to mention what I'm wearing. I'm actually very excited that I was able to break this knit out. It seemed so appropriate with the St. Patrick's Day theme we have going. I knit this as a vest. However, the pattern is the So-So Frill blouse by Nadine Joerg-Falvel, Madame Falvel Knits. And I knit this as my Thanksgiving vest. The modifications that I had made were to omit the sleeves. I only knit one ruffle when it calls for two. I did a split hem. It's supposed to have a fitted bodice, whereas or a body. Yeah, like the body portion of it is supposed to be more fitted, and it features these, I think that they're mock cables, but cables in place of ribbing, and I just did ribbing, so there's a lot of modifications that I made here. But I knit this out of it's an alpaca company. I can't think of it right now, but the colorway I know is called Harvest, and it was a sock yarn. And I held that with a strand of Drops Kid Silk Mohair in the colorway Chocolate, I think it is. And it's given me this very fuzzy and soft, super soft, this garment is, and very lightweight little vest. And I was shocked by how much I enjoyed this during the fall and when I really only intended to wear it like on Thanksgiving. And then I saw it in my closet today and I had no intention of wearing it, but I thought that the orange and green made sense for St. Patrick's Day. So I chucked it on with a t-shirt, which I'm experimenting with. I see a lot of people wearing their vests over a tee, and that's new for me. So I thought I'd try it out here today, and I think it's cute. It goes with the theme. I don't know that this is my favorite way to style this, but I was enjoying it for today, so that's what I'm wearing. Now, let's move into the whip that has seen the most progress since the last time we spoke. That is my Folklore cardigan by Lion Brand. This is the free pattern that is made to look like the, I guess, Folklore cardigan that Taylor Swift wears. And I am knitting this up for my little cousin, Miss Emma. So I am fortunately knitting this in a much smaller size than I typically would for myself. So this has now been on the needles for 29 days, and my goal is to get it done for Easter, which we are now 18 days away from. So I have my progress keeper here. I knit the fronts of this cardigan 2 at a time. It's a fully seamed garment. So I knit the fronts 2 at a time. It's bottom up, and I was at our little teddy bear here last week, and since then knit from the bear up on both sides of these front panels, which included the decreasing for the V-neck shaping of this cardigan, as well as the shaping for the armhole. And I took it upon myself to also go ahead and seam up the shoulders using a mattress stitch over the weekend. So I will say that I feel I think I ran into a couple of issues. Issues is like a little bit too dramatic a word to say, but I can't think of a better way to explain it. A couple obstacles, let's call it, when it came to shaping the neck. I'm going to hold it sort of quadrupled here so that we're looking at one of the front panels. The cardigan, like I said, is knit bottom up, and I had reduced the amount of stitches across one front panel by 4 stitches in total, and that was by removing 2 stitches from each of the moss sections. So this is a moss section, this is a moss section, and I took out 2 stitches from each of those panels in the hopes to shrink the size of this cardigan a little bit more. And when you are knitting bottom up and then decreasing to create the slope in the V-neck, you wind up eventually knitting this little skinny cable here away. It disappears eventually. You're eating into the body of this so that you can maintain the undisrupted cable going up the full front of the cardigan. And I think because I had reduced some of the moss stitches, I was struggling a little bit to figure out exactly how this whole decreasing section could happen as seamlessly as possible. And I was trying to reference photos in other projects pages, but of course, my situation was just a little bit different because I had made the modification of removing stitches. And I think in the end, what wound up happening is that by the time I was fully decreased in the armhole and in the V-neck, there's a lot going on there, a lot that you're paying attention to, and the pattern does not hold your hands throughout that. I think I may have decreased 1 extra stitch from the armhole instead of the V-neck. So I wound up with the right amount of stitches for going across this panel. So I believe that was 21 stitches I was supposed to wind up with. But I think I took 1 additional stitch away from the armhole side than I did the V-neck side. And therefore, I have 3 purl stitches in between my top 2 cables. And I think it should have been 2. And I could be wrong. Maybe I did it right. But it looks a little funny to me. So if you are knitting this pattern, I would maybe just suggest figuring out sort of your end goal of how many stitches you want allocated for each cable at the top shoulder here, and doing your decreases according to that number. As it is, I don't think that it's going to make a big difference in the actual finished product, but there are maybe some things that I would have done a little bit differently just for the overall look. And I'll be sure to include some close-ups of this so that hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. But I just feel like where the small cable disappears, then there's this little section of pearls that it seems a little bit too sparse next to your moss section. And then where the moss section ends, I equally feel like there's too much of a gap in between the cables. I think it's fine, and I don't think that it's going to be that obvious once it's all blocked and the button band is on and all of those things, but those are just maybe some things I would take into consideration if you are knitting this pattern. So at this point, we have the full sort of body of the cardigan worked. And like I said, I did go ahead and mattress stitch the front and back panels together. And I was just conscious to not do it so tightly that I couldn't fully block this, but it's actually, there, I'm not concerned about it. However, I didn't go ahead and seam up the sides of the cardigan because I do feel like that's something I definitely want to block before I do, as I anticipate the moss stitch on the edges here could grow in such a way that I don't want to restrict it from being too long or whatever it has to do in blocking. So I stitched together the shoulder seams. I didn't weave in the ends yet, just in case I do wind up blocking this and feel like it's a little too tight. I'll just undo that stitching and redo it. However, this is maybe something that I just overlooked when I was looking at the pattern. Or maybe this is my own mistake. Maybe it's because of the way that I altered some of the numbers here. But I was kind of upset that the cables from the front to the back panel don't line up like at all in the shoulder seam. And I just thought that was kind of unfortunate. I appreciate the layout of the cables on both the front and the back, and I think it's really beautiful, but I wish that there was a way for the front and back to line up at the shoulder seam. I know that might just be a me thing. I appreciate when when a pattern is so well thought out that those things happen. Those are the little details that make a good pattern a great pattern, right? And that was just maybe one of the things I thought was a little bit of a missed opportunity here. Let's show you this one because there's not threads coming out. But yeah, I thought that I didn't think about it. I just knit what it said to knit. And then when I went to go seam it together, I wanted to make sure that all of my cables were lining up just right. And then I realized, oh no, that's not part of this pattern. So interesting. Like I said, that could just be a me thing, and maybe those were the numbers. I'll have to look a little bit further, but that was just a little bit of a disappointment when I saw that there was no matching things up. So I went ahead and did the mattress stitch. It was a little bit trickier because the way that these panels are shaped at the shoulders are in that sort of stair-step way. So navigating the mattress stitch from sort of one stair step to the next, I was trying to be careful to do that in such a way it didn't look like I was eating up too much fabric, or I don't know, I didn't want it to look stair stepped in the end. And I think I did an okay job, but not my favorite. Not my favorite. So anyway, the body here is done. I will block this too so that I can seam up the sides. And so we could take off this progress keeper now. And prior to looking through the pattern at how the sleeves were constructed, I was hoping maybe there was a world in which I could just seam all of this up, pick up my sleeves, and go ahead and knit those in the round. However, I don't know why I was surprised that they're knit bottom up. There's shoulder shaping. Of course, you have to fill in this whole curve that you get, which I'm excited to see that fit because that's not something that I have done yet. And I think that will make for a really sort of store-bought look. But of course, I was not able to just go ahead and lickety split knit those in the round. So since we spoke, I have cast on my sleeves. And just like I have with the rest of the pieces in this seamed sweater, I chose to cast on with a provisional crochet cast on so that I could just dive into all of the cable work and all of these panels. And basically, once these sleeves are knit up, I will be seaming everything together completely and then going in and knitting all of the ribbing at the cuffs, the ribbing at the hem, the ribbing of the button band, and finishing everything off with a beautiful tubular Italian bind off. So we are at the very humble beginnings of these sleeves. I did just get these cast on yesterday. I am knitting them 2 at a time. And as of right now, because they're knit bottom up, you are increasing as you go. And that took a little brain activity to figure out the way that you're increasing. They say eventually you're knitting those in pattern with the different cables that they have in this sweater. And so it's just taken a little bit of brain activity to make sure that I have everything laid out just right and that I will wind up hopefully doing a better job of incorporating these increases into the pattern than I did with the decreases in pattern on the front panels. That's my goal here. I would love for it to be as just smooth and seamless as possible. So I am trying to observe as I add new stitches, what cable pattern they're supposed to be a part of, and trying to knit those as a knit or purl as I go so that hopefully once there's a full stitch count of a cable there, it's ready to go ahead and just be worked into pattern. I hope that that makes sense. Oh, see? No. So the sleeves are actually knit up pretty similar to the back panel where they have the center cable that is not featured at all on the front. And that is this traveling diamond with the moss stitch in the middle. And I really do enjoy that part of it. This feels like it's taking longer because I almost feel like I'm knitting up 2 back panels, which is just so not true at all. This is about half the size of the back panel. But because of the center cable, it feels like I'm just knitting the back twice. So, and it's increasing every time. So it's not getting any quicker. But my point when I started talking about the increases was that with the rest of this pattern, I have been trying to knit the whole thing smaller to accommodate the recipient of this cardigan. And this is no different. However, I'm conscious of how many increases the pattern says to do. And it's part of why I want to get the body of this sweater blocked prior to finishing the sleeves so that I can gauge if I'm going to do the full amount of increases as they call for in the pattern, or like the rest of the body, am I going to decrease by a few stitches? And by that, I mean not reach the full amount of increases that the pattern states. So I'm playing this one by ear a little bit. However, at the moment, we're increasing every 6th row by 2 stitches, one on either side of the sleeve. So it's gonna be a little bit before I reach the full amount of, I think, 16 increase rows total that I'm supposed to hit. So we've got a little time. Oh, see, no, 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 no. So we have a little time before I have to worry about that number. And I'm hoping to be able to reference the body and just look at the proportions of it all in order to get that as accurate as possible. So that's where we're at on the Folklore cardigan. 29 days it's been on the needles, and my goal is to meet the deadline of Easter, which is in 18 days. So I feel like the plan moving forward is to really focus on these sleeves and try to get this done as soon as possible. So then hopefully I'd like to give myself a week to get all of the ribbing and finishes done on the cuffs and all of that. So there we go. Folklore cardigan. Now, it really felt like this week we hit a little bit of a lull because my next cast on is going to be the Azucena sweater by Claudia Quintilla of Unit Toronto. However, I'm still waiting on the yarn for that one. So I've been very, very disciplined and have not cast on anything else that's new. However, I've been focusing on organizing my thoughts for my spring knitting plans, which is the next video that you should see from me, I think. And I also wanted to take a second to source some ideas for a little bit of a different sweater rehab surgery project that I'm maybe taking on. Recently, my dad acquired this Irish wool cable knit cardigan. It's comically similar to the Folklore cardigan, but it's a beautiful, what does the tag say? Bonner, Ireland, hand loomed. Did it say anything else? Hand wash, blah, blah, blah. So this was a cardigan that was made in Ireland, and my dad, like I said, acquired this from a family member who was much larger than my dad is. And so this is something that he is just absolutely swimming in. However, we really don't know anyone else who would appreciate the sentimental value of it as much as he does. And anyone who would fit into this. So I was looking at it and thinking I could probably make this work for him. I told him that I really have no interest in tampering with the body of this cardigan because it does have these pockets built in, and the rest of this, the fit of the actual body and the length don't look bad on him. It's a nice relaxed fit for him. However, the sleeves are comically long. And so I wanted to ask your opinion before I just go hacking up this sweater. It's so heavy, by the way. This is a true wool sweater. I had him try it on for me, and I placed a stitch marker where the end of the sleeve should fit him. So I'm talking about the actual end of the cuff should be a whopping 6-8 inches shorter than it is. So looking into this sweater, it's actually funny. There are even some ends that have been woven in that are still hanging out here. And I will include some close-ups of how this is made. It looks like it was seamed together, so knit flat and seamed. And basically my hope would be to shorten the sleeve. That's the goal. I don't know how, being that it is a seamed garment. But that's why we're here. So I figured I would maybe reach out to all of you and see if you have suggestions on how to do this. I can see where it was seamed, and like I said, I'll include some close-up footage of this, but I could see where it was seamed on the inside. There's even a bit of proper sewing thread that looks like it was just wrapped around to, I'm sure, ensure that it never comes apart. So my thought is that I could undo some of that seaming and rip out to the point of where the actual, I'm not sure what this stitch is called. Maybe you know it's maybe like a broken rib or something. I'm not very well versed in different stitch patterns, but to the point where that should end, and then just reknit the cuff for him. So if you have ideas on how I could make this work for my dad, let me know. I'm not going to do anything dramatic until I have an idea that it could work. So yeah, hopefully if you have thoughts on how to make that happen, I figure that with that one modification, this could be a comfortable sweater for my dad to wear. And like I said, it has some sentimental value to him. So it's not, so I wanted to try and make it work for him before we just consider giving it to someone else who won't appreciate the sentimental value. But I thought you all might appreciate this beautifully knit cardigan that's in pristine condition and has been hanging out in a closet for quite some years. So yeah, if you have ideas on how to shorten the sleeves on a seamed sweater, should I assume that this is knit bottom up? That's my thought. But maybe someone out there, definitely someone out there would know better than I. And hopefully we could crowdsource this idea. And honestly, that would make maybe if other people have heirloom sweaters that they're interested in rehabbing to make work for themselves or someone else a little bit better, then I'm happy to share that information too. So if you have ideas, definitely let me know in the comments. So I know that this is definitely going to be a shorter one today. Like I said, it was just one of those weeks where I guess everything was really at a standstill. And so I'm doing my best to take advantage of that by getting as much work done as I can on the Folklore cardigan and hopefully getting that to a place where it's just about ready to be wrapped up so that I can start my Azucena sweater with continuing my hope of having a mindful and mindless knit on the needles at the same time. I have felt a little bit lost without a truly mindless knit over the past week since I did put that sand cardigan aside so that I could think about the next steps for a few days. And so I think for those reasons too, I just haven't had as much knitting or I haven't gotten as much knitting done because there wasn't anything mindless to knit on. So that's kind of where things are at. Over the next week, I'll be trying to focus on the Folklore cardigan, hopefully getting my hands on the yarn for the Azucena sweater so I could join that knit along, which I mentioned last week is being run by Unit Toronto. And you can get that pattern for free by creating a project page on Ravelry and sending that to Unit Toronto, and they will give you the pattern for free. Or if you don't want to join the knit along and don't want to make a project page, you could use the code on the screen to get 50% off of that pattern. So hopefully all this timing works out in such a way that all of those things kind of lead into one another. And otherwise, I thought I would let you know if you had seen the shawl that I knit up for my Aunt Lori last week. The package arrived to her safely and with the surprise, and she very much loved it. She said she was hoping to wear it to work the next day. So I'm very glad to have gotten that out to her. And yeah, that's all I have for this week's podcast. A little bit of a shorter one, and that's just how these things go. But if you enjoyed this video and you like knitting content in general, I definitely would invite you to stick around. I post a weekly podcast video at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every Saturday morning, and I sprinkle in a few videos when I can in between. So please consider giving this video a thumbs up. You can subscribe and ring that bell so that you're notified whenever a new video goes up. And other than that, you guys, big ol' thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. All right, bye.